All right. Well, welcome to today's episode of Digging Deeper. I don't actually remember what episode it is.
It's somewhere in the thousands.
We're getting close to 100.
Are we?
Yeah. I think when we hit 100, I actually calculated it. It's going to be like the end of January. So
that will be when Jesus returns.
That gives us like 2.5 months to get a really good interview put together.
Yeah. So
maybe it will be with
we
Jesus.
check all 100 episodes and find enough to make one good podcast. Are we going to have like a huge, if we had a huge 10-year birthday party should we do like a huge all church celebration for
I think we could do like one big serving project where we're digging wells or something.
Yeah. Anyway. Welcome, Ben.
Yeah.
Good to have you here. Today we're recording this on a Monday after church. A little weird. Brandon is off at a church planting conference and got some sickness going through our staff. You're getting a little bit, but we're gonna power through this and so it'll be good. Yeah.
So fourth string right here.
Fourth string. You're not even B team. What is this?
No, I'm just kidding.
That's good.
Yeah, no, we talked about what should we talk about, and we wanted to discuss a little bit the message from yesterday, but then also we talked about maybe this could be a good opportunity to talk about some of the album that we just released and some of the recordings and some of the stuff that's been going on with our worship team too. But first, this is Digging Deeper, where we talk about the message. We dig deeper into the things that were talked about, maybe some of the things that weren't able to be talked about because we didn't have the time on a Sunday morning. But for those who want to hear a little bit more, or just even discussion of how it actually can relate to our lives a little bit more, this is the place for that. So we are going to start by talking a little bit about the message. And Brandon was really talking about leadership and leadership in many ways. Moses' leadership, but then he was also talking about leadership in the workplace, but he really hit home with leadership in the home. Right. I didn't mean to say it like that. He really hit home with leadership in your family and dynamics. And we actually had a really special moment at the end where the ministry prayer team came up and people were able to pray for breakthrough kind of situations in their families, all that kind of stuff. So Pete, would love to hear I'm not going to give you a question. I'm just going to say, what were your initial thoughts from yesterday? Because you weren't preaching. I wasn't preaching.
Yeah, usually Digging Deeper is a chance for us to interview the person that got a chance to speak and kind of pick their brain. Yeah. But Brandon's out of town. So I think we can both give some of our thoughts about it. And maybe you're listening to this, you're watching, you could leave a comment and give your own thoughts about it. Interact a little bit on social media. It was interesting. The context of the series Meltdown is looking at Old Testament characters who went through something in their life that led to a meltdown, led to problems, led to kind of chaos. And so Robert started last week looking at Abraham and his meltdown of not being patient, waiting on the Lord and creating a problem. And then this week it was Moses, who it wasn't so much it was interesting because last week Abraham clearly had his own literal meltdown. He made a mistake from his lack of patience. With this week, it was more like Moses was leading these people who were themselves having the meltdown, and then he starts having a meltdown as their leader. Mm-hmm. So the context of it, and you mentioned him bringing in family, is when you're leading others, whether you're a boss at work or whether you're just a parent at home, and the people that you're in charge of are being difficult to be led, and you find yourself I can't do this, I'm giving up. Moses comes to a moment of, God, just kill me. Yeah. Which, the side note, there's a meme I saw on social media, and it's a Star Wars meme. But
can you send that meme to us so we can put it up on the video?
It's like a picture in I think it's Return of the Jedi, the third Star Wars. There's this moment where Luke and Yoda are talking, and Yoda kind of crawls over and dies. And the meme says, I now understand Yoda, who would rather just roll over and die than answer one more of Luke's questions. As a parent, but the idea of Moses just being I can't take this anymore. And the meltdown for Moses was just almost the wanting to walk away from being a leader in general. Mm-hmm. It was, and you kind of mentioned as Brandon was going through it, it was all in Numbers 11. So if you were part of the service yesterday, or you weren't, you can go read that story for yourself. It's pretty, I mean, there's some like really rough stuff in that story. It's like some like people are really whining. God kind of comes back and we see Moses working through it.
And Brandon's examples, when he was saying them out loud, felt so like weak in comparison. Do you remember this?
Compared to God being like, I'll have meat come out of your nose.
Yeah, because it was like, I think the expectations are too high. I think the workplace is toxic. I think, and I'm like, man, what have we turned into? Because his big things were talking about hardship and discontentment being the source of why a leader needed, like Moses, needed to be present. And then even in their hardships and their discontentment, you start seeing Moses' hardships and his discontentment and how God met him there. And the three main points that Brandon was saying was that God listened patiently, that he spoke truthfully, and that he acted prudently. And then actually took those guidelines of how God responded to Moses and essentially said, this is how Moses as a leader should respond to the people. Right. And that's how in our leadership situations and in our spheres of influence, that's how we should respond to people. So I loved it. I feel like I'm someone who has a ton of like thoughts like always going in my brain, and to get like words to a situation to say like, okay, just 3 steps of leadership. It always really helps me to simplify all of the stuff that is going on up here. And so I loved the way that Brandon was able to pull these 3 things out. And I wanted to ask you, do you think that these actually work in those different spheres of leadership influence? Like, is this the same in the family as it is in the workplace, as it is in your marriage, as it is in your relationships with friends, all that kind of stuff?
Man, that's like,
can you just apply
a good
this
question?
Like, to all of it?
Well, I think even the way that Brandon approached it was, he mentioned a few times, like what each of these look like in different cases can be. What does it mean to act prudently in different situations? What does speaking truth look like in different situations? It's always relative to the situation. So I think they're big enough principles that, yeah, you can apply them. The part of the thing that stuck out to me, I guess, personally, it just emotionally was, Brandon started off by sharing some of his own, like, leadership is hard. I don't know if this, I can't prove this statement, but I think it's true. I think everyone who gets into some form of leadership comes to a moment where they have to apologize to a previous leader that they were a jerk to. Yeah. Because it's not until you actually put yourself in a position of leading other people that you realize how much it sucks sometimes. And the things that, like, I don't know, like, you're a bit younger, but you're in a leadership position for sure now. When I was in my 20s, like, pastors or bosses that I worked for, I was the grumbler. I was the complaint. You're stupid. Why are you doing this? That's a dumb decision. Yeah. And then when I found myself in that place, I was like, oh gosh, this is, I need to like write that person a letter. Have you ever had that happen? Have you ever like, yeah.
2 months ago, I actually called the executive pastor at the last church that I left. Yeah. Just as I've been in the role that I'm in now, just the different things that play out over the course of 2 years and what you see and the way that you lead and the decisions that I've made and the way that I've seen how that can impact people. And then the way also that I see people respond. I saw a lot of myself responding in a lot of similar ways that definitely made leadership hard for people in my last place. And I probably put more blame on people than they actually deserved. And so I don't know if they're listening right now, but it's not anything I didn't already say. Cause I remember calling and just saying like, man, I didn't understand what I didn't know. Yeah. And I need to say sorry. I need to say like that I'm sure I caused a lot of headaches and unneeded pressure. That if I knew what I knew now, I think those things could have gone a lot different. Yeah. Not saying that there weren't things that were going on that actually were not good, but I've I've definitely needed to do that. And I've actually had that happen with other people, with me too.
Yeah.
Where it's been a decision that I made or some kind of response situation where it didn't maybe go well. And a year later, or a year and a half later, it kind of resolves itself.
Yeah.
I think context in leadership can be a really hard thing because as a leader, you have a lot of context.
You know what's all going on.
And without,
yeah.
and there's things that you can communicate to people and there's things that you can't.
Sure.
And that can really muddy some waters. Because something that might make sense to you definitely doesn't make sense to someone else.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest complications of being a leader of anyone. I mean, whether that's, I'm talking church stuff right now, but family stuff, too, is, the conflict of being misunderstood.
Yeah. You know, the parallel between being a parent is so clear because I don't want to say like, well, the people that I'm leading are children. That's not my point. But like my kids don't know everything. They don't know everything behind the scenes of why I made that decision. That can be a bit simplistic. They don't quite understand the way that too much sugar is bad for them, but they just see dad being mean or something. And so and I'm coming back to what really your question, the 3 points of listening. And I think the thing about leadership is, number one, leadership can be very lonely because there's usually just one person in charge. And so, you know, you can have a team or whatever, and it gets that in the story. But the people that know all the context, know everything, are often a much smaller group of people. And the idea that God listens patiently is powerful because even if I'm by myself, even if I'm the only one that knows everything and I think I'm doing the right thing, no one else agrees with me. You turn to a story like that and you realize that, well, God knows. Like God always knows. And he's just the freedom to know that I can go to him and say, if no one else understands, I know that you understand.
Yeah.
And that you'll listen to me when I come to you with like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
When we talk about someone like Moses, I just thought of this as you were saying this right now. Do you think, I think the people respected him? Do you think people liked him?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like, do you think he was disliked, misunderstood, frustrated a lot of people?
I mean, I don't know about personally liking him, but definitely misunderstood and frustrating people. I mean, you had a couple, his like family revolted against him.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I think, the larger context of that story is him leading people into the complete unknown, right? Like the complete unknown. And, you know, it's easy for us. It's always easy when you read a story to read it backwards through your own, well, yeah, they were going to the promised land. What are you guys complaining about? They didn't know that. So they're like, why would you guys complain and want to go back to being slaves in Egypt? Well, when they were slaves in Egypt, life was hard, but every morning they woke up and they had food and they had shelter and they had an army protecting them. And it's like, there's something about your basic needs that even though you might not like the circumstances, my basic needs are getting met. And Moses was leading them into the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, just be like, hey, we're going to go somewhere you've never been before and it's going to be good. Follow me.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then it's like, okay, I'll follow you for a couple of days. Now we're in year 27.
Yeah. And no one would have chosen it.
Yeah. Like, what is going on? And so it's the unknown factor. Moses was the only one. And this is the other piece even of the story of Numbers 11. Up until this moment, Moses was going up onto a mountain talking to God, right? And like the voice of God was saying, Moses, I'm with you, do this thing. So he's coming down the mountain being like, I absolutely know God is telling me to do this. Yeah. The rest of the people weren't on the mountain. Yeah. They were just like, wait, what? Where are we going? What are you doing? Yeah. And so Moses had a perspective that the other people couldn't see. So he's telling them, follow me. And for them, they're just like, we're lost. We're starving. Yeah. Like it's uncomfortable out here. We're all going to die in the wilderness. What are you doing, Moses? Yeah. You're dumb. You shouldn't be in charge. And so the only person that understood Moses was God. Yeah. So to be able to go to him and say, God, I'm having a meltdown right now. Yeah. And God, I get it. I know, I listen. Whether they liked Moses is hard to say.
Yeah. Do you ever sense that as an executive pastor overseeing many ministries and just,
it's funny you say that. Digging Deeper is always a great kind of behind the curtain moment.
Mm-hmm. Is it okay to ask that?
Sure, I guess. Okay. So I would say this. I think that, and I hope this doesn't come across as like a cop-out, because it is the truth. I really do believe that one of my, I don't know how to maybe put this into words the best way. Okay, let's follow through the story. So Moses and God's response to Moses. Remember, so God listened and then God responded. God's first response to Moses was, okay, Moses, I hear you. I know you're struggling. You got a point. These people are being crazy. They're being dumb. Here's what I want you to do. You're not alone. Go and get 70 elders and share some of this responsibility. Mm-hmm. Don't try to and so in some ways, the truth that God speaks to Moses is leadership can be lonely, but you can also make it lonelier than it has to be. Mm-hmm. And I didn't call you to do this by yourself. I actually gave you Aaron and your sister and all these elders. And there's a moment where his father-in-law comes to him and says, Moses, what are you doing? Yeah. And if you follow the story, so it follows through, I think in maybe like verse 25, I don't have the Bible with me, but there comes a moment where God actually gives his spirit to other leaders. And Joshua's like, those two other guys are acting as prophets, stop them. And Moses is like, what? No, I want more help. I don't want to be alone. Let them be leaders. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, I feel God called me here to not carry the burden, but to help Brandon carry the burden. Mm-hmm. So the short answer is I don't feel it, but I know that Brandon does. Yeah. And so I think one of the reasons that God brought me here, and whether I always do good a job or not, that's up for debate, but to be even this title of executive pastor, what is an executive pastor? Well, part of my job is to try to make Brandon's life a little easier, to share some of the load. So, and that's the same with you, right? Yeah. You're doing the same thing. We're all on staff here so that someone like Brandon isn't trying to do it alone. Yeah. And I think,
can you imagine Brandon having to listen patiently, speak truthfully, and act prudently to me? That's why you're here. Pete's my boss, by the way, if you don't know.
Yeah, and I think Brandon is probably more capable than that than a lot of people I know to handle a much larger load of that. But no one should have to do it alone. Yeah. And so I think that is something, I hope I answered your question. I really do think that in a local church, which is what we are, small C church, God calls a person to sort of take the reins and stand at the forefront like a Moses. But I don't think God calls Moses by himself, and I don't think God calls a lead pastor by himself. And so the same is true for you, and even in the worship department, God hasn't called you to lead it by yourself. Yep. So the bringing other people together is part of God speaking truth and acting prudently. I think part of God acting prudently to us as leaders is to be like, hey, delegate, bring some other people into your circle, find some other people that do know the context, that do understand how hard it is. And if you tie that even into parenting, we live in an imperfect world where things are difficult, right? And we all have imperfect situations. And I'm not talking about being right or wrong or sin. I'm just saying it's imperfect. In God's perfect economy, parents aren't parenting alone. And I know there's probably people listening on here who are in a tough situation, and maybe you're a single parent. And I hope that maybe even the church can support you. But in an ideal world, the world that God ultimately wanted, is you're not parenting by yourself. You have a team. And so almost every parallel or example of leadership that I can see, whether it's in the home or business or church, is like part of God's speaking truth and responding prudently is saying, it's lonely, but don't make it more lonely than it has to be. Like, do this with other people. So that's, I don't know. That was kind of one of the things that I took away both from the story and what he was saying and the way that God does respond. And that's a little bit different though than how we as a leader take those three things and offer them to the people that we lead. Have you felt you to do that? Like, how have you had to, whether, I don't know, I'm saying like someone or you grumbling, but just you're a leader and you're trying to help. How do you listen, but then speak truth and act prudently? Have you felt that way at all?
Yeah, I would say that the listen patiently, speak truthfully parts come very easy to me. The act prudently
Like, what is the right thing to do?
Yeah. What is the right thing to do and how fast or how slow, dependent upon a situation, is something that I'm starting to learn more now in a pastoral role than I ever did in any of my previous church contexts. Like before here, I was a programming director at a really large church that moved very fast and just was managing different contract worship leaders and volunteers, and then doing a lot of tasks throughout the week. And so like it just moved fast and was I'm not saying it was a cutthroat environment, but it was just like Rise is a very like heavily relational environment in church. And so being a pastor here, the listen patiently, speak truthfully things I feel like I've really learned in previous contexts because I just had to really fast with volunteers or with people that maybe were paid or that kind of thing. The act prudently, being the sole pastoral figure for the 50 people that are a part of worship and production, it's a different pressure and it's a different level of like, figuring out what to do and how to do it and how fast or how slow to do it. I could go into a lot of specific situations. I don't really want to
I understand.
The podcast, but that's a growing piece for me as a leader too. And
I think the one thing that is so important, and I'm sure this isn't controversial, when it comes to acting prudently, you will always fail.
Yeah,
you're never going to bat 1,000.
If I can say really quick though, everything that you just talked about not doing it alone, is how I'm learning how to do this.
Yeah.
Because I've brought you into situations. I've brought Brandon into situations. I don't think there's anything that I've gone about that could have a potential to be, like disunifying or like could cause discontentment or hardships among whether it's people or like the organization or the system. Like, I don't feel like I've gone into anything without, you guys having my back or without, getting lots and lots of counsel from other people around me, which is a really great thing about a church too.
Yeah. And, plans fail for lack of counsel, as the Proverbs say. Yeah. I think that's such a huge part of it, like finding wisdom in others. What I was getting at was the idea though, of like, I've been at this longer than you have. I'll be 45 next week, but I'm still, not batting 1,000 by any means. The thing that I keep having to come back to as a leader of other people is that knowing that I'm not going to always act prudently, I'm going to make bad decisions. I just am. It's going to happen. The two before it, the listen patiently, have empathy, and speak in a way that's true but loving is so important. Because if I don't do those two things, then when I make a bad decision, I have a riot. Because if there's truth without grace or empathy, the truth is just mean. Yeah. And I even mean in the sense though of like when your leader makes a bad decision, and just put yourself in the follower position. Yeah. When my leader makes a bad decision, how do I react? The way that I react often depends on the kind of relationship I have with that person. When my leader is somebody that I know will listen to me, if I have a boss and I know they listen to me and I know we have an honest conversation and I know they care about me and they're willing to hear my thoughts, if they make a mistake, my tendency is to give grace. If my leader is obstinate and doesn't listen to anybody, and I know they're living on an island and I think they're just being arrogant, and then they make a mistake, my claws are out and I'm ready to tear them down. And that's human nature. Yeah. So I think the picture of following God's example of first listening and having a relationship of truth and honesty opens the door for grace when I make a bad decision. Yeah. If I'm just a lone wolf, not caring about anything, I don't need to explain myself to you. I'm in charge. Shut your mouth. I'm gonna do what I want. When I make a bad decision, no one will support me, and they'll fight to get rid of me. when I say, look, we're in this together. I have other people around me. I want to hear other points of view. I want to hear what you have to say. Like, here's where I'm at. Here's why I'm doing this. Let me give you some truth. Let me explain myself to you as best that I can and not try to live isolatedly. If it is a bad decision, more often than not, the people that I'm leading will support me and keep going with me.
It sounds simple to do that. Why don't we?
Because, well, it's fear. It's a mixture of arrogance and fear.
Yeah.
We all have it as humans. Part of the fear is I can't bring everybody in. And it can backfire in some ways. If you're not careful, you can go too far. You're never going to make any decisions if 20 people have to be involved in every decision. There have to be times where you're just like, look, I'm in charge. I got to make this decision. But also there's just this sense of, as you lead people, you can get hardened. You can get jaded. You can get like, I don't even care what you have to say. You guys are stupid. I'm just going to do this myself. And when that starts to settle in, it leads you down a bad path of leadership. Choosing to stay humble and stay like, look, I need to keep listening. I need to keep open. Like, I need to stop. I need to never come to a place that I think I know everything. And that's what we do as humans. We tend to convince ourselves that we know everything. You guys don't know it. I know because you've made the comment, as a leader, I know the context. That's true, but sometimes that's a crutch. Like, well, I know everything. I know the context, so I don't care what you have to say. It's like, well, no, I actually go ahead. Still tell me what you want to say. And maybe even by you having an opportunity to tell me what you think gives me the chance to explain some of the context. So now you support my decision.
Yeah.
So like, I think it's just
or it'll show, it'll call out a blind spot in you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So the inability to be open and honest with people that you lead and bring them into it and share leadership, I think is just an attack of the enemy. It's just a way to destroy leaders. When you try to do it yourself and you stand alone and you don't listen and you're just like, I got this. I don't need anybody else. I don't need your opinion. You might make a good decision, but as soon as you make a bad one, you're going to get torn down. And I think Satan knows that. And so he wants, we're talking in a church context here, he wants pastors to lead that way.
Yeah.
He wants pastors to lead in a way that as soon as they make a bad decision, the church erupts and makes a podcast about what a terrible leader you are. It's the truth, right?
Yeah.
People don't make podcasts about open, loving, humble leaders who make mistakes.
Yeah.
Ever.
It's true. That is something interesting as I'm thinking about it. And I probably have a bias because I work here, but I will say that as we're talking about that, there is no isolated part of Rise City in the way that it's run. You think about student ministries and how there's multiple leaders and all the different, not just like Anthony and Jen, but all the different leaders that are leading small groups, doing all those kinds of things. And you think about kids ministry and how in every room there's leaders and worship team. Like, it's not just me. There's like 10 or 15 people that go into that every single weekend, between who's on stage, who's in production, who's taking pictures, like social media. It's not just me putting videos together. It's like Brian Kochi taking photos and Kimmy and getting all the videos and all that kind of stuff, and teaching. It's not just one of you doing all of it. You're a teaching team, and you have a calendar that you work on and look at all the messages.
Our high level decisions aren't just Brandon sitting by himself in his office. And it starts at the top. It literally does. I've said this before, like, he's not here, but Brandon is a very, very easy person to work for because he welcomes people in and make decisions and things. So I agree. Rice is a great place. I do want to, let's talk a little bit, switch gears and talk a little bit about the worship album. So we're now a couple weeks in. You've released All the Praise, the Rise City Church worship album. I have a couple questions. First of all, let's start with the big high level one. Why? Why'd you do this?
Multiple reasons. One, if we didn't, the volunteers would never stop asking
They just wanted to
do original songs.
Okay.
A lot of people on our team are like all about it and see other churches doing that, see some of the songs that are getting written among different people on our team and are have a lot of energy for it. And so the birthplace of all of it kind of was that desire that I was seeing there, a desire that I was seeing from like our leadership here. I remember when interviewing, Brandon had talked about it. You had talked about it. So I knew it was something that was a desire from our church. Our volunteers had energy for it. I have been a part of songwriting projects before and recording things. And so I felt like coming in, I knew what it would entail, what it would take to actually be able to like lead through it and not just do like the recordings of things, but do like the videos, all of that. So it kind of turned into a passion project of mine that I feel like God impressed upon my heart. And just interestingly, the right people kept coming into the picture.
Yeah.
Like thinking about the different volunteers and who they were, like someone who has a drum studio in their basement at home, Ralph, and he's like able to take all the songs and like record parts and like come up with stuff at home. And then we've got people who like know audio engineering that came in, and just all of these different things that really, it felt like there was a directional kind of thing, that it was like, almost like a funnel. Like it was like, okay, we're actually going somewhere and the right people are here to be able to do it. Cool. And
now,
then
you didn't write all the songs, correct? But you were with them all, but you had other people songwriting with you, right?
Yeah. So Jean and I, when Jean was here, we worked on some songs together. He wrote all of Send Me. I had my hand on all the others. But then actually Dan Moon, he came up with like a lot of the lyrics for Everlasting and Evermore, and the melody and guitar parts and all that kind of stuff. So that was one of those things where like during services, I will say this, I always encourage our volunteers to sit in on one service, but during one of the sermons, Dan and I were just in the green room, and that's how Everlasting and Evermore happened. Cool. Was just working on that. And then Courtney, who sang You Are the Lord, she did one of the verses for You Are the Lord. So cool. she wrote that. And then everything else I had kind of started or influenced on all the others.
You posted, and I apologize, I don't remember which song it was, but you posted one of them, and you made, in the caption, you'd made the comment that it was a song that had been sitting with you for a long time, like a couple of years at least, right? Before you even got here, you were thinking about that song?
Yeah. That was Holy Is Your Name. And I had done like the verses and the chorus like 6 years ago. And then I just never had anything else to it. Yeah. I think some of that, not saying that in a different environment we couldn't have like gotten that going, but I'd never actually like brought that to anyone or done anything intentionally with it. And the moment that we started doing it like in our services as well as in our like rehearsals for the recording, it just like went somewhere.
Cool.
And so that was really cool. That was like 6 years ago. I mean, I was like just wrapping up college, and I remember I was really impressed upon at school about the idea of just congregational singing and using words like we, us, those kinds of things. And it's really simple. It's like, we sing to your holy name, we worship your holy name. I mean, it's just like really, really simple words. But I remember that had been there, and I'd always wanted to like do that in a church setting, but never had the song actually complete until we got here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now you made the comment too, and an interesting difference between you and the person sitting in the auditorium is everything to you is filtered through new and old, but the person in the auditorium, not a clue.
Yeah.
So I actually think there are people, I don't know how many of them are listening to this podcast, but I know there are people that sit in the auditorium that have no idea you're playing an original song when you play it, because they're not listening to K-Love or they don't have the latest Phil Wickham album. So it's interesting because there are people that don't even know that they're singing original music. And then when they find out, they're like, oh, whoa, Rise wrote that? Cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool experience. So
It's a very cool experience.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes it feel like we did something right.
yeah, because we're like, this is terrible. What is this? Oh, they wrote it. Okay, clap along. But that's not the case at all. People are like singing as if this was, they sing them as if they're like, oh yeah, this must be the latest.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
And you didn't ask me this question, but I'm just going to say it anyways. I get super passionate and excited about this. I have a song selection like roadmap that I do.
You do?
I call it a 1 through 5 kind of like method. And it's not mine. I got it from the church that I used to work at, and they got it from the church that planted them. So if you know Harvest Bible Chapel, it kind of
Chicago
came out of that system, and I've kind of adapted it to like what works for us. But in like 2 minutes, I'm going to explain it. Yeah. So it's,
we're podcasts. You got all day.
Imagine that you're, for San Diego people, imagine that you're climbing up Cowles Mountain or Coles Mountain, depending on where you live, or let's just go Iron Mountain. You can't like mispronounce that one. Okay. You're climbing a mountain. Okay.
Climbing a mountain. Thank you.
So 1 through 5, a 1 song is an invitational song. It's like you've got a group of 50 people that are going to climb this mountain together, and you're in the parking lot and you're like inspiring everyone to like say, we're going to go to the top of the mountain. Trust me, when we get to the top of the mountain, it's going to be a beautiful view. It's going to be an incredible experience. And like when we arrive there, it's just going to be like nothing you've ever experienced before. So, inspirational gathering kind of stuff. Like a song that would be a 1 song would be like Great Things, which is a song that we sing pretty often, which is come let us worship our King, come let us bow at his feet. He has done great things. It's like very like, we're going somewhere, so let's go. And then the 3 main songs that you want to hit is a 1 song, a 3 song, and a 5 song. A 3 song, you're like halfway up the mountain, and that's like a testimonial one. A 2 and a 4 are just kind of like the transitional songs, but you want to hit a 1, 3, and a 5. So a 3 is like halfway up the mountain, and you're like, man, we got to encourage each other to keep going because we're starting to get tired. Sun's beating down. It's hot. Forgot our water. I don't know. Right. But you're like halfway up, and it's like, keep going. We're going to sing something about testimony or the way that we've seen God work in our lives, in our hearts. And those songs might still have language about like us, the Holy Spirit, like in his work in our lives. But it's one of those where as a worship leader, you're like, I'm going to give you a taste of what it's like up there at the top of the mountain. Like this is what we need to just keep going. And then a 4 song is like the final stretch. A 5 is just not even talking about us anymore. A 5 is an arrival song. Like you're at the top of the mountain, you got the view. It's all about Jesus at that point. So that's like a, what a beautiful name song. Like what a beautiful name it is, the name of Jesus. No other words, like that song has nothing. It says nothing about us. It says nothing about what God gives to me or anything like that. It's just purely all worship towards Jesus, or like, great are you, Lord. It doesn't talk about me at all.
Right. Does All the Praise have that?
So All the Praise, that's kind of why we chose to do a 5-song EP, was to do a journey like that. I'll say that I don't think that we probably have a true like,
it's not an order, right? Because your 5th song is Send Me, which isn't really about God.
I would say Send Me. I was actually talking to our team about this over the weekend. It might be a new category. It might be like a 6. It might
like
be
it's a prayer for something.
It might be like you've gotten to that arrival moment, and now you're descending the mountain and want to go tell other people to go do it. Yeah. Like, so Send Me doesn't really fit that mold.
But the other 4.
Yeah, I'd say like All the Praise is like a 1 song. It's like gathering and talking about where we want to go. A 2 song is like the energy, keep going. Everlasting and Evermore is one of those. You Are the Lord is like a perfect 3 song. I don't really think that we have a 4 song in there. I think Holy Is Your Name is like a 5.
Cool.
Yeah. Where it's like, we've arrived there. So that's kind of where the idea originated. There were actually other songs that probably could have worked and fit that mold better that we just didn't end up choosing to do.
Yeah. What's interesting is how full circle we've just come, because 99.99% of people who come to church have no idea why you pick songs. And they'll complain about it.
Yeah.
I don't like that song. That's stupid. Why are we doing that? And you, as the leader, have all this context, have all this thought you've put into it, your reasons for it. And here we have this opportunity on a podcast to speak truth to people and explain. And here's why I do what I do.
It's a journey. It is, I mean, that's the sole reason that songs get picked for me is not the way that they sound, the way that they feel. Energy has something to do with it for sure. But more often than not, I'm thinking context and like, how do I take someone from point A, and not how do I take someone? How do I set the table for the Lord to take someone from point A to point B? And I mean, that's why it's actually really important to like be there on time. Because if you come in at like 10 minutes in, you missed all of the invitational part of worship. You missed all of the gathering part. Sometimes it can be a little hard in the way that we do our services because we have announcements or we have things that break it all up. Whereas like a worship night, like this method works a lot differently. But yeah, I mean, if you look at our whole song bank, I have a spreadsheet that has 1 song, 2 songs, 3 songs, 4 songs, 5 songs.
It's your Enneagram 1 sheet.
It is, but I'm not an Enneagram 1. I'm a 7. So you won't hear me like doing the same order over and over and over and over. It'll always be
Enneagram 1 probably made it.
Yeah.
But. No, it's cool. I think where I was getting is just like the idea that people, the grumbling, the complaining, the unhappiness with leaders often is rooted in just not having been spoken to truthfully. You know what I mean? And so like, it's cool that even on like a podcast like this, it's like, here's an opportunity for you as a leader to say, hey, listen, I don't usually get to say this, but as your leader, I want you to know this is why I choose these songs. This is, you may still not like, I don't really like that song or whatever, but at least you know, here's an opportunity for you to say, this is why as your leader, I'm choosing and why we're putting songs together this way.
And if I could say it to you, there's a lot of songs I don't like. Yeah, that we do. Honestly,
like, just kind of blur together too.
Yeah,
so that's
a lot of them feel the same and sound the same and all that. But there's songs that I don't like, but I know are easy to sing along with, that people can catch on to and are like very true. Right. There's some songs that are like super exciting, super fun, and a lot of churches might be doing them, but don't feel transformational as much as they feel.
Really say anything.
And I'm not trying to say that as a dig at other churches. And I bet some of our songs probably feel like that too. It's so objective, right? But sometimes doing a new song for the sake of doing a new song, or because it's popular or because it's on the radio, if it doesn't have like depth, it can sometimes, to me as a leader, feel transactional as opposed to transformational, like a Great Are You Lord kind of song. Like Great Are You Lord is so simple. Like it almost kind of feels like anybody could have written that, but it works because it's simple and true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. We will include links in the notes of this podcast, but outside of that, where should people go to listen to this music?
So it's on Spotify. So that's what I use to
go to
listen
the search
music.
Bar, type in Rise City Church Worship.
Rise City Worship. And then Apple Music. I mean, it went everywhere. So like Pandora, Amazon.
Where do I get the tape though? That's the
tape.
Where do I get my 8-track to play?
If you email Pete at Rise City Church.
There are no this is legitimate though. There are no physical copies of this album, and it's 2023. We're recording this.
We did it on purpose.
Everybody's doing it.
It's expensive to make albums.
I don't even have
CDs
a CD player anymore.
Yeah,
so everything is digital.
Another one, if you want to, and this is another full circle thing, if you want to see the team in action and not just listen to it, we did record everything live, and so we actually have videos of our worship team, production team members singing along with these songs and actually like doing the recording, that it could be an awesome way if you go to YouTube and watch it to feel like you're actually worshiping
Is that
alongside
Rise City
our
Church's
people.
YouTube or Rise City Worship YouTube?
Rise
Or
City
both?
Worship.
So if I go to Rise City Church, I'm not going
If
to
you go to Rise City Church, there's a playlist that links all the Rise City Worship stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
So either or.
All right.
But yeah, that's a great way to.
It's good.
See it
I've
too.
listened to that. I sent you a text of my daughter.
I know. That's cool.
She's just walking through singing the lion song.
Yeah.
She calls it. It's good. All right. Well, this is good, man. I'm glad we had a chance to talk, and there's a lot of good stuff. And next week, Brandon's going to continue the Meltdown series, and we're going to keep working through it. This is probably a 5 or 6 week series, leads us up to Christmas, so a lot to cover, and it'll be good. So
Sweet.
until next episode,
Awesome.
see you guys.
Bye.